It is becoming ever clearer that Western politicians and journalists are trying to stoke a new Cold War with China. And to that end, one of the key lines that keeps being repeated is that China's investments in the developing world represent a new form of imperialism. That was a narrative pushed by the BBC's Zainab Badawi when interviewing Mia Mottley, the Prime Minister of Barbados. Take a look at how Mottley expertly pushes back against the line of questioning from the BBC host.
I honestly would like to know why we in Barbados are so ingratiated with China. Why are we in so deep with China? So are you swapping one superpower for another?
Well, once again, I regret that the person who asked the question doesn't know our history. In 1977, Barbados established relations with the People's Republic of China. And therefore, to suggest that we are now seeking to ingratiate ourselves with China means that you don't understand where we've come from or what we're doing. Any country that lives in this world today, to exist in this world, ought to have relations with every country. And China is clearly a global power. And for us not to have a relationship with China, even if we didn't have one 47 years ago, would be foolish.
But you've been very complimentary about China. You had a phone conversation with President Xi Jinping recently. You said this is all about strengthening the relationship with China. In 2019, the government signed up to the BRI, the big infrastructure projects and so on. And some people are suspicious. They think that China wants to buy the family silver.
Well, let's put it this way. I've also been very complimentary of the Americans and the British and the Canadians. So that for me not to be complimentary of China seems unusual. And similarly, for persons who believe that because we want to be friendly with China means that we are a pawn, tells us what they think about us in the first place. Because we are capable of being, as our first Prime Minister said, friends of all and satellites of none.
But it's not just Barbados that's moving closer to China, it's the whole of the Caribbean. I mean,
it's the whole
investment
world.
From China has gone up many folds.
But so is the whole world. If I look correctly, I think the Chinese hold a large percentage of assets within the United States of America and a large amount of their treasuries as well. So for you to focus on the Caribbean or Africa with China without recognizing the role that China is playing in Europe or in the North Atlantic countries is a bit disingenuous and really reflects more that we are seen as pawns, regrettably, rather than countries with equal capacity to determine our destiny and to be part and parcel of that global conversation to fight the global issues of the day like climate and the pandemic.
All right, well, that's put me in my place, hasn't it?
No, not at all.
That was Mia Mottley with an incredibly impressive display there. That was the BBC World Service, I think. Mia Mottley, you probably recognise her by now because she's gone viral a number of times. There was a brilliant speech about vaccine inequality a couple of months ago, and then a speech at COP, which we showed on Tisky Stab. It was so good, really remarkable, really exceptional. She's an incredible politician, right? There aren't many people who speak like her, who speak so persuasively. And it's really refreshing, actually, for there to be a politician from the global south who, people in the global north are starting to recognise from a small island state because they're so articulate at putting forward a progressive position when it comes to sort of global politics. She's a Labour politician.
I really like her. I think what's interesting is, like you say, she's a Labour politician, and there has not been, despite Barbados becoming a republic, under the leadership of a Labour politician, who go, oh God, Aaron Bristani always goes back to Keir Starmer. But I found it strange that the Crown, the Queen, the House of Windsor, said congratulations on helping, found a republic. It's a big deal for a country. And yet the British Labour Party couldn't say our sister party in Barbados has achieved this great thing. And Europe, we always say, and there's a crisis of social democracy, lack of charismatic politicians, lack of big picture thinking. How do we own the future? Well, you've got a woman, she's not in charge, she's the Prime Minister. She's the leading politician in a government in a country of 320,000 people. She's a leading voice on climate change. She's a leading voice in terms of global geopolitics, and she's putting her country first and her people first. And so I find it odd that, Europeans, we always say, centre-left, it's in crisis, it's falling apart. Actually, there's some really inspiring, impressive examples of centre-left politicians around the world. Mia Mottley, more recently Lula da Silva in Brazil. The point is, of course, if you're not white and if you're not in Western Europe or North America, you don't count. And of course, nothing is changing. It's a bit like, we'll talk about this a bit later on, global inequality, nothing's really happening on it. Except if, as long as we don't talk about the 800 million people moved out of out of poverty by the Chinese Communist Party since 1990. They don't count because, of course, the Chinese Communist Party. No. We have to only talk about, where the global south is useless and feckless and they really need us and they're dependent on the global north. That's the conversation legacy media and the media political nexus in the global north wants to have. They don't want these people being powerful and assertive and articulate. So Mia Mottley in that sense is sensational, yes. I am sort of surprised it's taken this long for a global south politician to get this platform. Because we've got Twitter, we've got Facebook, and there's COP26, but there's been 25 before it. So we increasingly have these kind of global, meetings and events and conferences. We have the transmission mechanisms to take people like this to a mass audience. So yeah, I'm kind of surprised. I'm kind of surprised that you have a global south politician who's massive on Instagram and Twitter, a bit like AOC is, and who isn't sort of a big variable in the global north and our political conversation. Long may it continue and intensify. I think it's a really, really, really great thing.
I think it's a really positive development. Every time one of her videos goes viral, just because she's such a good communicator, they're always really phenomenal. I want to focus a bit more on the substance of the charges being made about Chinese investments in Barbados. Aaron, there you mentioned legacy media and how they cover these issues. The Sunday Times had an article on exactly this last week, which had a pretty loaded headline. Little England, not anymore. Barbados is becoming Little China. And then the subheading, awash with cash from Beijing, the island is ditching the Queen. Some fear it is simply swapping one colonial master for another. They're linking their investments in Barbados by China to Barbados' recent decision to leave the Commonwealth. So they no longer have the Queen as their head of state. They can have a directly elected president. We can go to some of the content of that piece. Beijing's involvement dates back decades to the Chinese-built Garfield Sobers Gymnasium, an indoor sports facility that opened in 1992. But Chinese projects have multiplied since the government signed up to Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative in 2018, an office devoted to investing in Barbados.